If there is life out there, intelligent life, how did we ever get the notion that it might be otherwise than friendly? Well, Mars, of course, is the god of war, so the planet bearing his name might be expected to have warlike intentions. In our broadcast, the Martians were as aggressive and ruthless as any human being. Ridiculous assumption on the face of it. They were supposedly as bad as we are, at our worst, and also much uglier. They brandished death rays in their slimy tentacles. And for a while at least, just toward the end of the radio play, they appeared to be totally invincible.
In early February 2023, the mainstream American media were ablaze with reports of unidentified flying objects being shot down by U.S. fighter jets. The first came on February 4th, when what the government said was a Chinese spy balloon was destroyed over ocean waters off the coast of South Carolina. In the following days, American fighter jets were also scrambled to shoot down UFOs over Canada, Alaska, and Michigan. The exact origin of these other aerial objects was not confirmed, and because of the difficulties posed by the terrain and the weather conditions where the aircraft's debris would have landed, recovery operations were quickly abandoned. This led to the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre fielding serious questions about whether one or more of these UFOs were alien in origin. What we find most telling is that Jean-Pierre did not dismiss this avenue of inquiry with smirking references to flying saucers or little green men. Humanity has always gazed up to deep space with a mixture of wonder and dread. In the distant past, we mistook the stars as the artwork of the gods. Our forefathers believed it was the lore of Osiris, Zeus, or Odin shimmering down upon them from above. But as humanity evolved and supernatural stories gave way to scientific theory, we have come to look at the night sky with a new terror in our hearts. The threat of an invasion from an alien race. H.G. Wells ignited this smoldering terror with his 1887 story, The War of the Worlds. First published as a serial in 1897 by Pearson's Magazine in the UK and Cosmopolitan Magazine in the US, the collected novel has never been out of print. Wells imagined aggressors from the planet Mars landing an expedition force in what was then present-day London. But Britain's Victorian-era weapons proved no match at all for the Martian onslaught of fighting machines, heat rays, and their red weed and clouds of black poison smoke. In the War of the Worlds, the Martians are only slain by the germs and bacteria that humanity has long since developed a resistance to. In Wells' mind, the mightiest armaments of his era, the 16-pound Royal Artillery Cannon and the Royal Navy ironclad vessel, the Thunderchild, were little more than a temporary nuisance to the alien fighting force.
Conferring with someone, can't quite see who. Oh, yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yes, it is. Now they've parted, and the professor moves around one side, studying the object while the captain and two policemen advance with something in their hands. I can see it now. It's a white handkerchief tied to a pole. Flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, what anything means. Wait a minute, something's happening. A humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas tanks of the automobiles, spreading everywhere. It's coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we will return to that point at the earliest opportunity. In the meantime, we have a late bulletin from San Diego, California. Professor Indelkoffer, speaking at a dinner of the California Astronomical Society, expressed the opinion that the explosions on Mars are undoubtedly nothing more than severe volcanic disturbances on the surface of the planet.
H.G. denounced me for doing it, but later when he realized that our broadcast, like his story, was not intended to cause riots, but just to entertain, we got to be good friends. I was forgiven. Whether all those people who jammed the highways and even took to the hills to escape the Martians have forgiven me, it's another matter.
New York City was just demolished, and they were coming closer. All of North Jersey is an inferno, and they are proceeding south. We thought that this was it. Listening to that show, I said we were very impressionable at that age because of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, and that really made a big impression on us.
One fellow in particular who owned a store took the money from his cash register and loaded his car up with food and took off for the mountains and left his wife and children at home.
In the many decades since, millions of readers and later cinema goers and television viewers have been thrilled by depictions of aggressors from beyond planet Earth. But it hasn't just been science fiction writers who've expressed concerns about what could be lurking in the deep dark of space. Some of the greatest scientific minds of our time have given full-throttled voice to their fears of a real-life, scientific, plausible alien invasion. The late theoretical physicist and cosmologist Stephen Hawking warned, if aliens visit us, the outcome would be much as when Columbus landed in America, which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans. Even cosmologists, NASA scientists, and TV star Carl Sagan, who advocated that any civilization intelligent enough to master interstellar travel could not also be hostile, called the practice of actively trying to contact beings from beyond Earth deeply unwise and immature. Noted computational neuroscientist Nick Bostrom went further, saying he is positively thrilled that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, has come up with nothing so far. Bostrom said, "The silence of the night sky is golden."
It is conceivable that a spherical ship will land in front of the Washington Monument, and a figure with 4 antennas and otherwise looking like the professional football player will walk out and demand to see our leader. But I hope very much that the universe of circumstance is wider than the rather shoddy imaginations of science fiction writers for 30 or 40 years. And I'm pretty convinced it is. We've not found their guidance so great in any but the most modest activities, like going to the moon, which is not very much.
That we haven't yet found evidence of intelligent life outside our own pale blue planet is sometimes referred to as the Fermi paradox. Enrico Fermi was an Italian physicist and creator of the world's first nuclear reactor. He has been called the father of the nuclear age and the architect of the atomic bomb. When he wasn't busy splitting atoms, Fermi pondered why in such a vast universe no other intelligence had been detected. There have been several detailed attempts to explain the Fermi paradox. It could be that aliens are simply beyond the scope of our detection, that they are too far away for us to notice. Maybe intelligent species have existed, but have long since caused their own self-annihilation through inadvertent climate change, overuses of their natural resources, or nuclear war. Or perhaps they have some sort of advanced cloaking technology and actually remain hidden by design. Or could it be that we just aren't pointing our cameras in the right direction? But let's just assume they are out there, that somewhere in what some scientists call the dark forest, there is a highly intelligent race, and that they are on their way to the planet Earth with very bad intentions. How much notice we'd have to prepare would depend on several factors, not least of which would be if we were lucky enough to be looking at the right part of the night sky to spot a large object or fleet of objects heading towards us. It is worth remembering that Hale-Bopp, the great comet of 1997, which was so large and bright that it was visible to the naked eye for well over a year, had already passed Jupiter before anyone noticed it. So it is entirely possible that we would have days or weeks, not months or years, to prepare for an alien arrival. In that scenario, the governments of the world would have little choice but to announce the news immediately. That life existed elsewhere and is already knocking on our door would be an impossible secret to keep. Any one of the tens of thousands of nightly amateur stargazers would be just as likely to find the approaching craft as NASA or any official agency. The comet Hale-Bopp, after all, was named after the two men who discovered it, a professional stargazer named Alan Hale, but also Thomas Bopp, an amateur who was using a borrowed telescope for the very first time.
Trying to prepare a few brief remarks on this, I came upon a comment by Thomas Carlyle, somewhat crusty old fellow, who, upon thinking about the stars, said, "A sad spectacle. If they be inhabited, what a scope for misery and folly. If they be not inhabited, what a waste of space." There was a little more than a year ago in the Armenian Soviet Socialist Republic, in fact at the foot of Mount Ararat, on which Noah's Ark is said to be beached, a symposium sponsored jointly by the National Academy of Sciences of the United States and the Soviet Academy of Sciences on the question of contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. This was a 6-day meeting which ran from morning to late at night and involved a large group of people, around 40 or 50 people, mostly from USA, USSR, but a few other nations. It involved, in addition to physicists and astronomers, biologists, chemists, anthropologists, archaeologists, historians, people concerned with coding messages and decoding them, and was a turning point, I think, in the study of the subject, not because some striking new opinions or results were expressed, but because I think it marks the turning point in the increasing respectability of the subject. It is now okay to talk about life elsewhere or intelligent life elsewhere, whereas a decade or two ago it wasn't okay. It was considered too speculative to be worth any investment of time.
A government announcement of an imminent visitation from an alien race would be followed by a two-pronged response. First, every attempt to communicate with the aliens would be made, and made again and again. it would be critical to at least try to understand their motive for traveling to Earth. Every type of communication would be attempted, and any response would be recorded for artificial intelligence and human experts all over the globe to attempt to translate. After all, fate of humanity might depend on a timely response to any message the aliens send us. At the same time, the world's military would be readied. Leaders of world governments would meet in secret to discuss various scenarios based on preliminary assessment reports. But the people of the world would want the assurances of fighter jets roaring through the sky, tanks thundering on the streets, and every other appearance that there was some sort of plan for the unthinkable. A special Earth defense chain of command could be established, along the lines of the Allies during World War II. Nuclear bombs would be pointed towards the skies, nuclear submarines in the ocean's depths would lay in wait with their torpedo bays open. The world would hold its collective breath. The answer to the question, could we really defend ourselves against an alien invasion, depends entirely on the type of alien and the type of invasion. First, let's define what type of extraterrestrial threat we would be facing. In 1964, Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev proposed a measuring system for the technological capabilities of any intelligent alien life form out there in the darkness of space. In his paper entitled Transmission of Information by Extraterrestrial Civilizations, he introduced what has become known as the Kardashev scale. A Type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale is a race capable of harnessing the total energy on their home planet. A Type 2 civilization would be sufficiently advanced to harness the full energy of the entire star system. And if there is such a thing as the near godlike race out there, a Type 3 civilization would be able to bend the forces of the entire galaxy to their will. Humanity is currently able to harness the power of our home planet's fossil, tidal, wind, and solar energy, as well as having discovered how to tap the awesome forces of nuclear and atomic energy. Many scientists, including the legendary Carl Sagan, placed humanity at around 0.7 on the Kardashev scale. Sagan suggested that if we continue to increase our ability to convert and consume new energy at around 3% a year, we will become a full Type 1 civilization by about the year 2180. Then a Type 2 civilization by the year 4000, and finally reach the almost unimaginable power of a Type 3 civilization if we survive and thrive for another million years. Returning to this scenario of an alien invasion on Earth, the Kardashev scale becomes not just a measuring stick for the type of technology we'd be fighting against, but also a guide to how good our chances would be at avoiding being wiped out, eaten, or enslaved. The good news, if you can call it that, is we don't need to worry about anything approaching a Type 3 civilization invading us. To be blunt, while we wouldn't have a snowball's chance in Hades, we probably wouldn't know what hit us either. These Type 3 aliens, if they exist, will never attack us. If only because the word attack isn't appropriate for what would be an incidental extermination. This morning, when you washed your coffee cup, you wiped out thousands of germs. But it would be silly to suggest that you attacked them. You merely destroyed them as a consequence of not wanting the afternoon's green tea to have the aftertaste of the morning's black coffee. You didn't give a single thought to the life forms you were casually ending, and to a race able to harness the power of an entire galaxy, wiping our planet or star system, and perhaps even the entire local group of our Milky Way, would be of little concern. Any doom that came at the tentacles of a Type 3 alien race would come quickly and without warning, as they went about the type of galaxy-spanning endeavors that are literally beyond our imaginations. These facts, coupled with the certainty humanity could fight back about as well as the germs in your coffee cup this morning, make worrying about an invasion from a Type 3 alien civilization about as appropriate as worrying about what you'll have for breakfast on Sunday, May 22nd, in the year 5262. That said, we'd be just as screwed if a Type 2 alien race decided to show up with bad intentions. In fact, if any alien civilization even approaching a Type 2 level of tech, say a 1.6 or a 1.7, arrived on our doorstep, it would be a mismatch. To quote United States Colonel Marines Private First Class William L. Hudson in the 80s classic movie Aliens, Earth versus a Type 2 civilization means game over, man. Game over. Faced with a race who commands something close to energy of an entire star system, there would be nothing humanity could do to either resist or indeed hide from any malevolent intentions. These creatures would be able to move planets, play billiards with comets, and manipulate a star. So they would make very short work of the least physically strong species of ape on planet Earth. And the very fact that they're able to travel to the Earth in the first place would mean naturally that they had developed a propulsion system capable of doing so. NASA infamously made use of the thruster technology originally developed by Germany for World War II V-2 rockets. So it follows that any race who has the tech to move a spacecraft extremely quickly also has the tech to fire a projectile at least that quickly. A single missile the size of, say, a V-2 rocket shot at Earth at a mere fraction of the speeds required for a spaceship to travel between star systems would be all that was required to win any real-life War of the Worlds. That's right, the impact from just one such strike would level not only entire cities but entire continents, and after that the resulting dust and ash that such a massive force would throw into the air would block out the sun and slowly choke all life on Earth. With just one missile, much our planet would have been rendered uninhabitable for 3 to 6 years.
The number of stars in our galaxy alone is so staggeringly large, in the order of 10 to the 11 or more. The probability of stars having planetary systems is so high, we think perhaps half. The probability that those planetary systems might be comparable with our own, and that the stars have some kind of an ecosphere, a sphere in which the radiation is suitable for life, that it's not too hot, not too cold, meeting the other criteria, seems so reasonable. These bits of information have come from astronomy primarily. Then we join with the biochemists who tell us about the probable evolution of life here on Earth, the kinds of elements that are necessary for it, DNA molecules and amino acids and the like. Amino acids which have now been found in meteorites, that we have now found interstellar molecules floating out in the space between stars, so that you know the materials for a carbon-based life exist. We know that many of the building blocks of life in our own solar system exist off of our planet. If you put these kinds of probabilities together, it begins to lead to the sorts of conclusions that we started with as an initial premise, and which apparently no one on the panel has disagreed, and that is that life must exist in the universe, and it must exist quite abundantly.
It is worth pointing out that several sci-fi stories have depicted aliens merely dropping large metallic rods at us from space. Sounds silly, but a solid metal rod the size of a telephone pole dropped from orbit would impact Earth with as much force as any non-nuclear weapon yet devised by mankind. But a Type 2 alien species wouldn't have to make such a mess while killing us all, not unless they really had a thing for watching huge explosions. A race capable of manipulating entire star systems wouldn't have any trouble pushing around a tiny sphere like the Earth, a comparatively tiny planet in the galactic scheme of things. A gentle nudge with a tractor beam and our blue planet would drift off the so-called Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone is the lane in which we orbit the sun, not too close to the sun for our atmosphere to be burned off, but far enough away so that everything on our planet is not frozen solid, or as Goldilocks herself put it, not too hot, not too cold. These Type 2 aliens could either boil us or freeze us to death in a matter of months. Then they could just as gently return the planet back to the Goldilocks zone, with most of the interesting landmarks, buildings, and infrastructure more or less intact. The depopulated planet Earth would be then safe and ready for them to inhabit, or maybe turn into a museum or perhaps a giant theme park. In reality, the truth is, our attackers wouldn't need to tinker with Earth's orbit to wreak catastrophic, civilization-ending damage upon us. Depending on the size and destiny of their spacecraft, their mere presence in a high Earth orbit would result in an unending series of tidal waves, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions the likes of which humanity has never seen. They could simply pull up to our orbit and watch as the Earth's own weather attacked us. Another deadly possibility is that the Type 2 species would speed up or slow down the Earth's rotation. Though we don't feel it, we are all moving along with the planet as it rotates. At the equator, this works out to around 1,000 miles per hour. If aliens hit the brakes on this 24-hour spin cycle, everything in our world would be launched eastwards at up to 1,000 miles an hour. And yes, we mean everything in the world. The largest forests in Europe would be uprooted and flung thousands of feet in the air. Trees would darken the skies like historians say arrows did in ancient battlefields. Every building and man-made structure on Earth, from bamboo honeymoon villas in the Maldives to New York's One Freedom Tower, from San Francisco's Golden State Bridge to the Sydney Opera House, these structures wouldn't merely collapse, but instantly be ripped into thousands of projectiles and thrown eastward at the speed of bullets fired from a handgun. The fastest speed any human has reached into free fall from an aircraft is just under 300 miles an hour, and that has been achieved only a handful of times by trained professionals wearing drag-resistant clothing and falling headfirst towards the Earth. If an alien attack stopped the Earth spinning, every person on Earth would be launched through the air at speeds of over 3 times as fast. Those of us in buildings would be thrown out of the windows or splattered against walls, mountains or debris. The cars, trains, and other vehicles we are piloting would collide with other objects at approaching the speed of sound. Even if a handful of humans somehow survived, the Earth's atmosphere would still be spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, resulting in winds more than strong enough to scour the very soil and water from the Earth's surface. Even if our attackers merely slowed down the Earth's rotation and the turning decelerated gradually, the effects would still be devastating. Literally thousands of natural disasters would ensue. Floods, earthquakes, tidal waves, avalanches, volcanic eruptions would explode all over the planet, all at one time. Without the 24-hour cycle of a day and night we're used to, the biological circadian rhythms would be thrown entirely out of whack. This rhythmic cellular process that tells our bodies when to sleep, when to wake, are dependent upon regular changes in sunlight to function properly. Many creatures on Earth, from insects to trees, rely on circadian rhythms to live. Changes to these cycles so quickly would see a mass extinction the likes of which has not visited our planet since the asteroid that ended the reign of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Atmospheric patterns on Earth are also tied to the planet's rotation. It would greatly change the way air currents on a global scale and in turn unleash apocalyptic weather. These massive changes to air currents would also result in desert appearing where forests currently stand, invert the seasons, and destroy our food resources as well as render huge parts of the world uninhabitable. Again, in this scenario, the aliens could kick back and indulge their sadistic side, watching comfortably from orbit as humanity was swept closer and closer to extinction. Of course, we're already seeing something similar, albeit on a much smaller scale, as human-caused climate change alters global weather patterns, and that damage has been done over decades and by accident. Imagine this process playing out over a matter of weeks as part of a malicious plan. We could go on, but this is sufficient to show that humanity would be hopelessly, laughably mismatched if it ever had to go mono versus alieno with a species even approaching level 2 on the Kardashev scale.
I think as a theologian, on the possibilities of life beyond Earth, and even communication with such life, my first reaction is, that's great. Because it seems always great to me when God's world gets a little bigger and when I get a somewhat more true view of my place and my smallness in that universe. And to achieve this by a growing awareness, which I do not find at all threatening as George Wald, a growing awareness that really sinks in that whatever the question of communication is, it is highly, highly probable that we are only one possible such civilization.
So, for us to have any chance at all of living through a hypothetical alien invasion, we'd better hope that the interplanetary assailants were no more than a 0.9 on the Kardashev scale. In other words, we better hope they were just a few centuries ahead of us in terms of weaponry and battle tech. But a few centuries can be a very long time in technological advancements. Keep in mind that humanity went from the Wright brothers' first flight to the Apollo moon landing in just 65 years. If that isn't illustration enough, let's remind ourselves how quickly weaponry can be advanced when there is sufficient motivation. And nothing motivates innovation quite like killing an enemy before they kill you. The First World War was waged a little over a century ago. It was fought with cavalry and horse-pulled cannons. As anyone who's studied poetry in high school will know, tens of thousands of men spent years sniping at each other from hand-dug trenches up and down the front lines of France. Literally digging in was the best tactics available at the time. Of course, none of that would be effective against the armored vehicles and air forces of the Second World War, just 21 years later. And it is laughable to imagine what the fighter jets, stealth bombers, and drones of the 21st century could do to the best armies of 1919. It is difficult to overstate the military superiority just one single century of technology advancement can provide. In the air, the Great War's greatest pilot was the German ace Manfred Albrecht Freyr von Richthofen, remembered as the infamous Red Baron. Von Richthofen, the first great fighter pilot, shot down over 70 Allied planes during World War I. The Red Baron flew a rotary-powered Fokker triplane with top speed of 110 miles per hour that was armed with two 7.9mm machine guns. Those guns had an effective range of 600 meters. As for missiles, the Fokker didn't carry any. For the very good reason that jet-propelled explosives, along with jet-propelled anything, really hadn't been invented yet. The Red Baron was capable of bombing, though, at least sort of. He and his contemporaries would reach into a leather bag between their legs, take out a standard battlefield grenade, pulling the pin with their teeth, and then tossing it from the cockpit. Now let's compare the Red Baron's plane to a modern counterpart, the F-35 Lightning II, which is widely considered to be the world's leading fighter plane today. The F-35 is capable of Mach 1.6, or 1,227.63 miles per hour. Literally 10 times as fast as the Red Baron's Fokker. The F-35 is armed with a 25mm GAU-22, a 4-barrel rotary cannon that is literally tens of thousands of times more powerful than anything seen in World War I period, much less that could be mounted on an airplane. The F-35 can also be armed with air-to-air, air-to-ground, and air-to-ship missiles that hit any target within a range of 300 miles with pinpoint accuracy. The impact of just one missile is many more times the force of World War I's biggest land-based cannon, the iconic Big Bertha, which was almost as big as a 2-story house. It is plausible that a single F-35, backed perhaps with drones, could have forced any of the Great War's powers to the negotiating table, if not have led to a full and total surrender. With that thought, let's return to the scenario that an alien race with 200 or 400 years head start on us in terms of weapons and tech attacked Earth. Movies like Independence Day are quick to show us that even our nuclear weapons would be ineffective against an alien incursion, and that would almost certainly be the case. Any vessel capable of traveling the cosmos at the speeds needed to transverse from their part of the galaxy to ours would need a hell of a shield. Despite its name, space is not an empty medium. It is filled with clouds of rock, dust particles, and stray meteors, which, if struck by a craft flying at even a fraction of the speed of light, would obliterate that spaceship. Dr. Chi-Tim Hong of the Canadian Institute for Theoretical Astrophysics published a paper where he calculated that any spacecraft traveling at 20% of light speed would suffer catastrophic damage even if it encountered a dust grain of just 15 microns. 15 microns means a speck of dust 100 times smaller than a single grain of table salt. And there are bigger debris than dust in space, of course. So whatever alien craft is hurtling towards us would have some sort of force shield that would easily protect it against Earth's entire stockpile of 12,700 nukes. So, would humanity have no chance at all? Would we have to roll over and hope our new masters left a handful of us alive? Let's game plan this out. One of the key pieces of information in any war is understanding the enemy's objectives. Knowledge of what the aliens wanted to achieve would be vital in developing a strategy to defeating them, or at least thwarting them long enough that they gave up on the objective and leave. Science fiction has imagined alien motherships descending from the heavens and telling us exactly what they want. Whether they demand we hand over all our natural resources, agree to become slave labor, or, as the invaders at Independence Day informed us, simply die. But surely a species more intelligent than us would have worked out that. If we were informed of their objective, we'd have an increased chance of stopping them. The most likely scenario is we'd be left to figure out what it was that the aliens wanted all by ourselves. So what would be our best guesses as to why they'd travel this far to attack us? The classic 1980s sci-fi miniseries V had its fascist visitors travel across the stars with a clandestine objective to steal Earth's water. The show was a huge success. It drew as many viewers to NBC during the summer of 1984 as the Olympic Games, and it has influenced 2 generations of science fiction writers. That probably explains why so many sci-fi stories, the 2011 Battlefield LA being just one of them, have their alien invaders arrive on Earth looking to pilfer our oceans. But this aquatic motivation makes no scientific sense. Hydrogen and oxygen, the building blocks of H2O, aka water, are 2 of the most abundant chemical elements in the universe. No alien, much less an entire fleet of 10-mile-wide alien starships, will need to come to Earth to collect water. The galaxy, in fact every galaxy, has water in abundance. Even if a gaggle of goose-stepping lizard people had developed a particular taste for H2O from our solar system, perhaps like your rich aunt who only drinks bottled Evian, they wouldn't need to bother humanity to get their fix. That's because, far from being only place orbiting the sun containing water, the Earth is merely one of literally dozens of heavenly bodies containing the wet stuff. Solar winds and runaway greenhouse effects stripped Mars and Venus of their water, sure, but the former planet Pluto is mostly made of ice, and the rings of Saturn are mostly frozen water. Sticking with planets, most people are aware that Jupiter is a type of planet called a gas giant. And yes, 2 of those gases are hydrogen and oxygen. Sucking up all that gas and then using it to create water would be an easy task for any race capable of inventing a functioning faster-than-life drive. Then there are the entire oceans of water in our neighborhood moons, including Ceres, Europa, Callisto, Enceladus, Titan, Mimas, and Triton. And why would any thirsty alien drive past Ganymede? Ganymede is a moon that orbits Jupiter. It is bigger than both Pluto and Mercury, and it's comprised almost entirely of, you guessed it, water. NASA has overwhelming evidence that this giant satellite has massive oceans. These oceans are trapped between an ice crust that is a mile deep and a frozen core of pure ice. Unsurprisingly, this ice-water-ice sandwich holds more water than all the liquid on planet Earth combined. And that's all before we get to the other sources of H2O outside of our solar system. Astronomers can literally see giant clouds of water orbiting distant planets and have concluded that many nebulas are essentially made up of water. The Orion Nebula, for example, contains 2,000 million trillion gallons of water, roughly 7 times the amount contained on planet Earth. It is worth thinking about the fact that every drop of water in our solar system, from the sweat on your forehead to a shard of ice hurling at 37,000 miles per hour in orbit around Jupiter, came from the same source, the gigantic solar nebula that condensed over 1 billion years to form our star and everything that orbits it. So, when the spaceships do descend through our clouds and start firing nuclear lasers, at least we'll be spared the sight of little green men in Speedos, because they won't be here for a swim.
I don't think we should wait until the encounter occurs, but that we should do all in our power to prepare ourselves for it. The manner in which we first meet may determine the character of all our subsequent relations. Let us never forget the fatal impact we've had upon innumerable peoples on this earth, peoples of our own species who trusted us, befriended us, and who we destroyed by our thoughtlessness and insensitivity to their needs and their vulnerabilities. The simple truth is that before we can communicate with others successfully, we must first learn to communicate with ourselves successfully, and we're a long way from having achieved that. Perhaps that is where we ought to begin, with ourselves, learning to communicate with ourselves, with all the different peoples and nations of the earth.
Okay then, what could they want if not water? Food? Well, it's very hard to imagine why any alien force would need to travel all the way to Earth to find sustenance. Again, we are talking about beings with massively powerful technology at their disposal. Surely they could terraform their nearest moons or planets to produce as much food as they'd ever need. And as the Martians found out in the War of the Worlds, any food from Earth would likely be harmful to them, containing bacteria and germs for which their non-terrestrial immune systems have no defense against. Wouldn't it be much easier for them to grow or breed food more appropriate to their own biology? Perhaps the invaders are after the Earth's other riches then? Our metal, ores, or gems? Also highly unlikely. There's no need to come to Earth for any type of ore or naturally occurring substance, because any substance is created naturally here would also be readily available elsewhere, meaning the aliens would find what they needed on a moon or a planet closer to their homeworld, where there wouldn't be any species of hairless apes distracting them from their mining duties. Not convinced? That's okay. Generations of sci-fi movies and shows have depicted aliens mining Earth for all sorts of materials, both real and imagined. You need a little more information before you accept what we are saying? We've got it. Let's take diamonds as an example. Diamonds are the rarest and therefore the most expensive and hardest type of rock on Earth. Except they aren't. Diamonds are no more rare than any of a dozen types of gemstone. And there are 6 naturally formed substances tougher than diamond. Even if the aliens just thought diamonds were pretty, they wouldn't need to travel to Earth and pay Tiffany prices to get them. First, it is a total myth that these gems are rare on Earth, and they certainly aren't rare in space either. All that is required to create natural diamonds is intense pressure and heat, and there's a lot of both of that in every star, planet, moon, and potentially comets out there. Second, diamonds are easy to make. Humans have not one but two lab-based methods of creating diamonds. The high-pressure, high-temperature process, or HPHT, that was invented in the 1950s, and the more recently developed chemical vapor deposition, or CVD process. Our imagined aliens have warp speed and force shields powerful enough to shrug off every nuke on Earth, but lack the tech to squeeze superheated carbon? Highly unlikely. And with that notion shot down like Will Smith in Independence Day, let's move to another trope of the 20th century sci-fi: that aliens will one day arrive to enslave the human race. Merely 2 decades into the 21st century, we know that really makes no sense. Maybe science fiction writers haven't noticed, but robots, AI, and drones have been replacing human labor at increasing rates. Any alien species capable of traversing the galaxy surely wouldn't need to travel all the way here and spend time and effort rounding up a press gang of strange bipedal creatures from planet Earth. Because surely, if they had spaceships and faster-than-light travel, they'd also have robots or even synthetic beings to do all the menial tasks for them. Beings forcibly abducted from planet Earth would make for a terrible workforce. Humans would plot rebellions, plan escapes, and suicide bombings. Humans need to eat several times a day, and they sleep a lot. Humans also get sick, cold, hot, and perhaps sooner than aliens could even believe possible. We also get old pretty quickly, reproduce rather slowly, and require a decade and a half before we approach our full heights, physically or mentally. Thus, we can probably dismiss the idea of aliens rounding us up and dressing us up in all steel bikinis, as if the lot of us look nearly as good as Carrie Fisher in her prime. So, if aliens aren't coming for water, food, resources, or for slave labor, what could they want? The Predator series has been hit and miss since the 1980s Arnold Schwarzenegger classic, but the central premise of aliens coming to Earth to hunt humans for fun remains so interesting precisely because it's so plausible. The point of an alien invasion can simply be to kill us, for either sport like in the Predator series, or motivated by a sense of self-defense as imagined in works like Ender's Game. Some people think that killing for sport is a uniquely human indictment, but it's not. There have been lions, tigers, and other big cats who've hunted human and beast alike, not for food, but for fun. The violent nature of chimpanzees cannot be overstated, and surely we've all seen a feline literally play cat and mouse. On Earth, at least, predatory animals tend to be the ones who have developed problem-solving abilities. The same may well be true for alien life. The movie Predator imagines individual or small groups of Billy Bob aliens showing up and hunting humans for sport. If this is indeed what we would be facing, the best strategy could be to make such sport too dangerous for the visitors, and that would take identifying any alien incursion as it was happening and attacking them with the best forces we could muster. Or, if the aliens are keeping themselves hidden and only dropping down to Earth for a quick safari, perhaps any government who discovered their presence would decide to pretend not to notice. Perhaps in this scenario, it would be better to observe, gather intel, and not alert a murderous species that we are onto them, even at the cost of human lives. As mentioned before, Carl Sagan believed that any species smart enough to star travel would be too sophisticated to indulge in bloodlust. He may be right, but looking at our own race, we've wiped out over 900 species since the Middle Ages, and despite getting smarter and smarter, few people seem to care that we are killing dozens more each year. And this leads us to one of the reasons many scientists postulate that any extraterrestrial will undoubtedly be hostile. The dark forest theory begins by recognizing that humanity was one of the thousands of species that started off in the dark forest of prehistory. But it was us, not any other type of animal, that came to dominate all the others. Put simply, humans claim the right to do whatever we liked with the entire planet because we are, as a species, very, very dangerous. And we've been getting progressively more dangerous generation to generation. Just look at the last 100 years. The dark forest theory then postulates that any alien species who emerged on top of the food chain in their dark forest on their planet must also be extremely dangerous. And when the other dangerous species come across us in the wilds of the Milky Way, they would also assume that we are murderous by nature, just like them, and move to kill us before we had a chance to attack them first. This first strike scenario is perhaps the most likely of all the setups we've explored. But even though the alien intention is simply to murder, we may have a chance of winning an all-out war. H.G. Wells' Martians were slain by germs and bacteria. It was a great ending to the War of the Worlds, the mightiest invaders slain by the smallest life forms on Earth after all of humanity's weapons had failed. Independence Day reimagined the ending as humans using a computer virus to defeat the aggressors. But while it's possible that aliens could be susceptible to earthly viruses and other illnesses, we'd be equally likely to be infected by any disease that they bring. An introduced invasive species of microbe brought accidentally or on purpose could also wipe us out. There are plenty of analogies for this on Earth. Think of the colonization of the Americas or the 1970 film The Andromeda Strain.
As a somewhat matter-of-fact discussant in the affair, I feel that I'm somewhat inclined to direct some attention to what I think it really will be like, and not to these mirror-like discussions, which are undoubtedly more important in our present state of mind, which somehow I think will be perhaps supported by taking a calmer look at what the real situation is. I think, on the contrary, that an enormous distance separates us from the nearest existing or even memorable group of a similar kind. An enormous distance, not the distance to the moon, not the distance to the planets, not the distance to the nearest stars, but tens or even hundreds or perhaps 1,000 times that distance. That means that even traveling at the speed of light, no round trip is likely to be imaginable. No answer to the communication. They say hello, you say how are you, and he says fine. That conversation will take at least centuries. The meaning will slowly come out of this study, and it will contain, for better or worse, the answer to many questions that we cannot ourselves answer, which we'll have to debate and interpret and work on and test. And the successors of Professor Wald will still be studying whether it could really be right what they say about this. He said, not at all. That isn't at all what that phrase means. That isn't at all what that result means. Quite a different thing is the case, and a new discovery will have been made. And I don't think at all, any more than we fail to profit by reading the literature of the other universities, will we fail to profit by reading this extraordinary message which they will contain.
When the motherships break through the clouds, we should not rely on microbes doing all of our fighting for us. We would have to attack them with everything that we have. Just because our biggest weapons wouldn't hurt the aliens, that doesn't mean we would necessarily be defenseless. And greater intelligence is not an absolute guarantee of greater guile or superior tactics. History provides dozens of examples, the Battle of Thermopylae being perhaps the most famous, of inferior forces engaging, if not actually defeating, vastly superior forces through brainpower and courage. And it's not always obvious what the best weapons are before they are matched against each other in battle. For example, U.S. Marine instructor and Iraq war veteran John Davis wrote that in his opinion, even his best Marines, wearing the latest in Kevlar protection, would lose in a melee battle against medieval knights. The heyday of the knight in plate armor was in the 1300s, so we are talking about a millennium's worth of war technology advancement. But, according to a highly respected modern-day Marine, without guns the knight would win. Perhaps humans could find similar advantages in the war against the ET attackers. Tactics must change when new weaponry is brought into the theater of war, and in turn, new weapons are developed to better execute or adapt to these new tactics. And to illustrate how more advanced weapons force tactics to change, we need look no further than the tank. Developed by the British and first deployed at the Battle of Somme, tanks provided mobile, protected lethality on the battlefield. And on the defensive, the tank was, of course, the best weapon to use against an enemy with its own tanks. After the Somme, no army wanted to bring a cavalry to a tank fight. But Russia's recent invasion of Ukraine has signaled that the age of the tank is coming to an end. While new armor and tactics have kept the tank as the centerpiece of warfare for a century, ultra-lightweight shoulder-mounted weapons like the US FGM-148 Javelin seem to be beyond the tank's ability to reinvent itself. Tanks are expensive, costing $10 million to produce and hundreds of thousands of dollars to maintain and transport to the front lines. Meanwhile, javelins cost a couple $100,000 and can be carried by a single soldier. It is possible that our existing weapons could be the FGM-148 to the aliens' tanks. And let's remember, we have our entire species and every resource we possess right here. The aliens will arrive with a limited amount of ships, weapons, and equipment, and those supplies will gradually be used up if humanity can engage in a drawn-out guerrilla war. We may even pull off a surprise victory or two here or there. And any victory, surprising as they may be, will be critical to keeping up our side's morale long enough to cost the aliens enough in terms of lost life or hardware to abandon their mission. We as humans, for better or worse, can be a vengeful species, and avenging the death of loved ones and our way of life would be a powerful motivator to any surviving people. It is easy to imagine an alien race being horrified at our species' capacity to commit to suicide missions, for example. There will be a limit to how much life or equipment loss they are prepared to expend in order to exterminate humanity. They may even have a calculation where they think humanity is sufficiently reduced in size and economic might that we've been put back hundreds of years in terms of development. And that may be victory enough for them to leave, to take back to the stars with a mission accomplished banner draped across their battleship's hull.
A Viking spacecraft is being readied to land on Mars in 1976, carrying an automated chemical laboratory to sample Martian soil for life forms. The discovery of just one bacteria on Mars, or any other body of the solar system, would indicate that the whole chain of evolutions, cosmic, chemical, and biological, is at work everywhere. In that case, the creation of life anywhere in the universe would be more the rule than the exception. In that case, there may be other intelligent civilizations capable of communicating with us.
And may I say, so that we can have a somewhat warmer and livelier conversation as this meeting goes on, I can conceive of no nightmare as terrifying as establishing such communication with the so-called superior, or if you wish, advanced technology in outer space.
What do you worry about, George? What's going to happen when one of these books are printed?
Oh, I think a degree of degradation of the human enterprise.
And yet, in reality, given everything we've just covered about humanity's slender chances against any alien force advanced enough to attack Earth, maybe the real victory would be ours. Any scenario where the invasion ends with some of us still alive is a win for humanity. No matter the loss of life or the devastation to the Earth, in a war of the worlds, when we are in it for the species, merely surviving is victory.